Stop. So just so we have it again, so it's on this tape, say and spell your name and tell us who you are.
Great. My name is Dana Stevens, Danastevens, and I'm the Director of Clinical Services
And what do you, for who?
for Northwest Autism Center.
Okay. So tell us about your role at Northwest Autism Center.
I'm the Director of Clinical Services at Northwest Autism Center. We're a nonprofit organization located here in Spokane, Washington. Um, my job encompasses several things. The first thing is running our direct services. So we have applied behavior analysis treatment for individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities in a clinic setting as well as in-home and community-based settings. So I oversee all the staffing, the direct services for that direct treatment that we provide for individuals at Northwest Autism Center. Another part of my role is working with the community. So I do a lot of training for a wide range of community members. So it might be a child care center, law enforcement, first responders, school districts. We've done foster care families, working for different agencies such as developmental disabilities and other organizations for that. So we do a lot of training and education for individuals in the community and support for them. Another part of my role is looking at interprofessional education. So we really want to build competency and capacity for other disciplines and for professionals in the field to be able to work with this population and other disabilities. So we have contracts with all of our local universities here in Spokane. So Washington State University, Eastern University, Whitworth University, and Gonzaga University. And so we have practicum students that will come in from different disciplines such as speech and language pathology, occupational therapy, that might come in and get practicum hours. We also have practicum opportunities for people who want to do applied behavior analysis treatment. So for board certified behavior analysts, which again is trying to build that capacity for experts in the field that can truly provide that treatment. We also provide research opportunities for those universities. So we might collaborate with them and help them identify participants or different research opportunities. So we're also contributing in that way with the universities. Another thing that I do at Northwest Autism Center is with Dawn Seidel, our executive director, but we look at a systems approach. So we have federal grants that people contract out with us. And so we will help them navigate our community, get participants, do trainings, et cetera, for that. We will go to Olympia and talk about what those issues are. So we really have a presence in the systems approach, whether it's locally and being on different advisory boards and work groups and focus groups, to again at the state level and at times also at the national level, which we will present some of our research or our methods at different conferences and nationally as well. So that's the nice thing about Northwest Autism Center is that we're a nonprofit organization that provides direct services, but also does the bigger picture with our mission and vision, that it's not just focused on one specific area. We know that we need to have the community, have the universities, have the systems approach to really make impact and difference and increase quality of life across the lifespan. So there's multiple things that we help and do and that I participate at Northwest Autism Center.
So let's talk a little bit.
People come here, right, Melissa? I think that Northwest Autism Center is so important to the community for a wide range of reasons, whether it's the family. So we really help families and individuals who suspect maybe they have autism. So we also do free screenings across the lifespan. So if somebody suspects that there's possible autism, they can come in and they would spend an hour with the clinician or myself and go through a screening process and talk about the issues and then where to go next if there's a concern for autism. The thing about with the families is they can come to our Northwest Autism Center for just about anything. We are a hub of information, support, resources, and treatment. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to try to find it out. Or if it doesn't exist, we're going to figure out a way to talk to legislatures or figure out ways to develop programs and fill those gaps. So families can come for screenings, for information, for how to navigate the system, which is a really important part. So sometimes when you have a child with autism, you feel very alone and very isolated and you don't have that community. What we want them to do is get connected with a community. And if we can't do it, we'll get them connected with somebody else in other organizations or other providers in the community. And so I think that's one of the big major benefits of our nonprofit organization is let's get you connected. Where are you at? What do you need? And where do we go next? And let's help you on that journey, whatever that may be and wherever they are actually at.
What's been some of the feedback from the families who have started using you guys?
So I have to say it's been amazing to get the feedback from families. We're very data driven. So we always do surveys and evaluations of families of what their experiences have been or what they think is positive or what needs to be changed. We're constantly looking through that to make sure that our services are meeting the needs of those families. We're doing the best that we can. So we gather a lot of information and data from that. But when families call and share a story like, wow, you guys helped us. I was able to go trick-or-treating with my child and tell us that. It is fabulous. When I'm able to hear families come in and say, wow, your staff are amazing, and they are amazing. Northwest Autism staff are the most talented and professional and caring staff I think I've ever been able to work with. I think that our staff is very unique because of the nonprofit. They believe in the mission and the vision. It's a bigger picture than just coming and doing your job and providing direct services. And they believe in that. And we have a wonderful team about that. But when families talk about skills that their children have done, or they're able to leave their child with us because they can finally trust somebody and never been gone, that's what makes all the difference in the world. I can do and give kids skills and they can see these graphs and data and go out, but to see that it's really made an impact on that individual and the quality of life of those families, that's all that it's about. And that's what we do, and that's why we're here.
So we got to see a little bit, that's good.
Yeah.
No, this is good. So we got to see a little bit of the staff working with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it, over and over again, we found out it's the little things.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about, it's those little things that really do matter, that a child can't communicate and all of a sudden the staff is working with them and they can do this. Talk about the PECS board a little bit and how some of that is taking place. So let's talk about some of this stuff that we got to videotape there when we were there.
Well, at Northwest Autism Center, when we're providing treatment, especially in the early intensive day treatment program for the children that are from ages 2 to 5, that come in for 3 hours a day, 4 days a week for a period of 48 days. So it's a short-term intensive program. But when people come in and observe, they might not understand that treatment's going on. They are playing. They're on the floor with them, like, well, they're just playing. But for individuals with autism or related disabilities that have a hard time playing or doing imagination play or going through and having challenges with social communication. So you might not know that treatment is going on, but it is very intentional. It is very prescribed. And you'll see people taking on their iPads data. That's all we do is take data if we're able to do. For instance, if a child's sitting there playing and the behavior technician might go, Dana, and if that child looks, because they responded to their name, that's huge. And that's part of some of the treatment that we might be able to do, that they are able to attend and know that their name, and you might not think how important that is, but it's hugely important. Or you might see us at snack and, having them do snack. Those kids during snack, they're getting treatment continuously for every single moment of the day. They might have a very limited food repertoire, meaning they will only eat one specific thing. And it might be, that's all that they will eat. During that time, we're having families bring in different foods that they would like them to do. And we're doing treatment. Can they put it next to it? Can they, put it on their plate? Can they touch it? And then the day that they put in their mouth and eat a bite of an apple, it's a celebration. And it's life-changing. during also the times communication is embedded in everything we do. It's a core deficit that we know with individuals with autism have. It is also the most important thing. If you don't have a functional way to communicate, you got nothing. And that is the biggest thing. So you might see different ways if it's eliciting verbal and expanding that with our speech and language services and board certified behavior analysts, or it might be using different communication methods, such as the picture exchange communication system, otherwise known as PECS, which is looking at that picture you're exchanging, and it's a very prescribed phase system that shows that, wow, they learned for the first time, I want that cookie. And usually they're grabbing for the cookie, and you're like, can't get the cookie. And then somebody comes in and hands a picture, and it's like, you hand that picture, you get the cookie, and you can have that. That's the first step, and that is huge in being able to do that. And then it goes through different phases, and all of our staff are trained in that, and we also educate and train the families so they can do it at home. So when they're at home and that child wants a glass of milk because they're thirsty, they're able to get the picture and be able to do that. And so these are some of the systems and kind of methods of treatment. Some other things that you might see in our clinic is daily living skills. A big issue is toileting. I mean, that is the best thing when you can get a child out of diapers and they're independent. Daycares won't take them unless they're toilet trained. Schools have challenges. They can't be in general education sometimes if they're not. So and of course the cost of it and the challenges with the families. So there's a very prescribed, we call a task analysis or a TA. And so you break down steps, very discrete steps that would go through. And then we do what we call a forward or backward chaining. So you might just see them going through these steps and having pictures of, all right, first I take down my pants, then I do this, then I do this. But there's ways that we use with prompting and reinforcement. It's very scientific, but you might not notice it unless you have the trained eye to know exactly what they're doing at all times. There shouldn't be a moment during that day that we're not intentionally providing treatment and trying to develop skills.
One of the things we really liked is that you have the windows too for
Right.
families to watch. So tell us a little bit about that and why you set it up that way.
So the clinic that we've set up is very intentional in the environment in multiple things, whether it's the gym floor, special, more expensive gym floor that has a soft and a give that we have with children if they're on the floor and doing things. One of the special things about Northwest Autism Center and what we intentionally did is that we have observation windows. And it is critical to have observation windows when you're providing treatment for multiple reasons. It's nice for training purposes. It's nice for other providers to come in when we're doing coordination of care and they are able to see the child. Because when you go into the room and other families come into the room, it changes. It changes dynamics. Kids know that they're there. And so people are able to observe, and we're able to have our board certified behavior analysts talk about it. Do you see what they're doing? Because we need to explain what they're doing during the treatment, again, because it might be very nuanced. Say, see what they waited for it until they actually said something, then they got it, right? So it's nice for training purposes, but it's amazing for families. It's 100% transparency. I mean, it is difficult for families to trust other people. If you have a child that is nonverbal or has really challenging behaviors and unsafe, then it's a hard trust. And so we encourage families, and they're able to stay the entire time, or if they want to come and drop off. So it's great for training and education, but also transparency. And it's different for therapists to be in there because you're like doing treatment in a fishbowl. Someone's in there, you never know who's in the back watching. And, we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and you should be doing treatment like me or our executive director or a parent or somebody important is back there watching every move you do. And those are the expectations for that. So it has been very intentional for that. Whitworth University, we have a clinic that's housed there. We weren't able to put the observation windows there, but we were able to work and do a camera system. And so they are able to look through a camera, they can have the headphones, and they can sit there and watch the entire time. So it's trust, it's training, it's education, And it's just truly best practice.
So let's talk a little bit about your work with those up-and-coming
Hmm.
clinicians, or talk about how your intention is to train the whole medical community.
Right.
So they start diagnosing early, so they start kind of having a concept of what they should be doing if they're out in a professional practice.
Hmm. Well, one of the main points of Northwest Autism Center and our mission and vision is, again, to build competency capacity across everyone in the community. It is so critical, and really a focus of ours is to be up to date on the newest policies, to be at the table for what those policies or standards of care are, providing information, knowing exactly what the research is, so then we can be upfront and in the forefront and provide that information to our community, provide it to the pediatricians, provide it to all the different providers, provide it to individuals who are doing billing. How do you get them through the insurance and navigation all the way to treatment? It is critical that they are able to do screenings and diagnosis and know how to do a prescription and get them into applied behavior analysis, and how to either seek out resources or provide specialists for other medical conditions, and do it in the broader sense. I always say I want to retire. Someday I want to retire, and I want to get out of a job, which means we wouldn't be needed anymore. Then everybody else is doing that on their own. So it is a critical component for that medical community, so individuals don't have to wait. Families don't have to wonder what's going on and question themselves if it's their parenting or anything, the stressors, because they can't go to the grocery store due to challenging behaviors, that they can get the help and assistance as early as possible, especially as early as possible, because we know earlier intervention can change the trajectory. It makes the biggest difference. And we also know that from birth to 3, there's services that you can't get after that. And it's important for them to be able to get there as fast as possible. It's also important not only for the physicians to understand for the younger populations and catch it and get them into treatment and make sure they have their medical concerns done, but for older children as well that haven't been diagnosed, and making sure that it's not just the younger population, but what happens when they're 11 and 12 and 15 and 17. When we have individuals coming in at screening when they're teenagers or in their 20s or even their 50s or 60s, we know there's still a big gap for that. And we need to make sure that other physicians can understand and screen and identify and be able to give assistance to those populations and ages as well.
So let's talk about what is autism.
Okay. So autism spectrum disorder is a neurological disorder that has 2 main areas of deficits and challenges. The first is social communication. So how do we communicate? And it's not just how we talk and have conversations back and forth, but it's also about nonverbal communication. And we know how much is nonverbal, facial expressions, hand movements, body movements. To be able to really communicate to others, you need to be able to understand that, identify. And that is one of the core deficits that individuals with autism have. So it's really that communication, social, that interaction with others, developing relationships, communicating wants and needs. So that's one area. The other area is repetitive and ritualistic behaviors, so that behavioral kind of component. So during that part, in those areas, it could be very rigid with routines, have to have the routines. They could be very literal. They can have repetitive behaviors, so they might do something over and over and over, whether it's motor, like hand flapping or rocking or tapping, or it could also be vocal. Different things that they're doing over and over again. Another part of the ritualistic and behavior component could also have sensory issues. And it's not all individuals to get the diagnosis have that, but that's one of the criteria that can give you a diagnosis of autism. So they can have sensory issues where they have challenges where they can have hyper or hypo. So I'm hypersensitive to things. I'm hypersensitive to sound, to touch, to taste, to smells, to movements. So those are things that just overwhelm me and I want to avoid. Or you could be hypo, where I'm kind of undersensitive to any of the sensory things that are going around me. So I want to seek that out. I want to seek out noises. I want to seek out touch. I want to seek out different smells. And so there's two different extremes, and now that impacts you in the environment is very challenging for individuals. So those are the two main areas, again, social communication and ritualistic and repetitive behaviors. It has nothing to do with intellectual or cognitive disabilities. You can have intellectual or cognitive disabilities also with autism, but it's a very big misconception that they either are really highly capable or they have intellectual disabilities. But the only two areas are the communication and the behaviors.
I was another coming that you provided for us.
All right,
So let's talk.
let's talk about it.
Let's talk. And
1 in
I
51 and 1 in 37 boys.
Yeah.
4
but-
times the worldwide.
Yeah, I was just looking at all your little charts.
There, it's
So
there, you know.
we're just gonna leave it here. We're
Yep.
gonna talk about
Dude,
these
yep,
things.
yep, yep.
uh-huh.
There you go.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the stats, and people are saying, "Oh my gosh, is it increasing? Is it what? What are the stats like? Is it increasing? What are your thoughts on it, or what is research on this?"
So the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder is rising. And people always ask, is it because we're diagnosing better? Or is it that we've expanded, the criteria to include more individuals that can get the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder? The answer is it is on the rise. Statistically, it doesn't equate for the rise that we've seen in autism. Are we diagnosing better? Maybe. Unfortunately, though, we can reliably diagnose at 18 months, but the national average doesn't go until age 4. And then if you are a person of color, it even later than that, 5 and 6. So we're missing these kids during that time. With the prevalence rate, right now in 2018, the Center for Disease Control came out with their new prevalence rate. And the new prevalence rate is 1 in 59. But that is 1 in 37 boys, which is, when people hear that, it's like, wow. If you think of a typical elementary school or a typical 3rd grade in an elementary school, you're guaranteed to have individuals with autism, particularly with the boys. So boys have a 4 times greater rate of being a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Autism does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic status you come from. It does not matter your ethnicity. And it is also a worldwide epidemic. So it doesn't just occur higher rates in first world or third world countries. It happens worldwide, and we've seen the increase of autism spectrum worldwide. I would say is the number one childhood epidemic that we have. And people say, well, what is the cause? And that is actually the billion-dollar question. We don't know what the cause is, so we really don't have a cure. And that is where a lot of research and time and money needs to be spent to be able to figure this out so we can address it sooner and see what we can do for treatment and hopefully stop this epidemic.
You talk about the stuff like that. What's missing in that right now, and then how is it helping people once the kids are in there?
So early intervention is critical. For many reasons, as far as the brain and the plasticity for children when they're younger has more plasticity in the brain, so treatment can actually make a difference neurologically in the brain. We know that early intervention can actually decrease the cost of adult services by 2/3. And that's a huge number. So this is also an economic reason why we need early intervention, why we need to catch it faster, so we don't spend more money as they're getting older or go into adult life and looking at that care. Getting into early intervention, not only that we know that it's best, we need to look at early intervention not only because it makes such a great impact and can change the trajectory of the life of the child and the family, but also there's services that families can access that are not available to them as they get older. So individuals, if you get a diagnosis between birth and 3, then you're able to access the birth to 3 educational system. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, states that individuals in that age range of birth to 3 can get an evaluation at no cost to the families as well as treatment, and they need to get those services. After they hit age 3, then they can go into the educational system with the schools as well, where they can go to preschools with special education services and access that to no cost to the families. They don't have to go through the insurance or pay out of pocket. They have a right to a free and appropriate public education for that, and they can access those services. So you don't need to wait until you're in kindergarten when you have a child who is identified with autism spectrum disorder or identified with special education needs. They must provide those needs. And so it's important for families to understand that. Not only if you have a concern with autism or any developmental issues with your child, absolutely talk to your pediatrician, go the medical route, but you also should be contacting your local school districts and go to Child Find and say, I think my child might have some issues and I want an evaluation. So there's 2 routes that families can be able to go. The public education route and be able to get an identification there, or early intervention through the infant and toddler network, or going through the medical route through the physician and going through their insurance to be able to get medical necessity and treatment. And so it's really critical for multiple reasons for early intervention, for gaining the skills, for economic, and for accessing services that they won't be able to do later on.
I want to know, and I want to talk about, autism is everybody's problem.
Mm-hmm.
From parenting to going out, to teaching, to education, to medical provisions, to hospitalization, to, let's talk about that. Should autism be on our radar?
So why should you care about autism? Everybody needs to care about autism. Everybody needs to understand the disability, understand the unique skills and the challenges that individuals who have autism and their families face on a daily level. Any part of the community is going to come and interface with individuals with autism. Everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you work, doesn't matter where you go. You will meet somebody with autism, whether you know it or not. It's important for education. I know that years ago, you could go into a school district and talk to teachers that teach general education and say, hey, have you had a kid with autism? No. Now I do trainings and say, hey, have you had a child with autism in your classroom? And almost everybody will raise their hand. Every teacher will have a student who is on the spectrum, guaranteed. If you're medical, you guaranteed to have a patient who has autism and who is on the spectrum. We have specialists in the medical community that see a higher rate, but really every physician needs to know, because look at the numbers and look at the population. Everybody needs to know about autism in the medical community. Community organizations, the YMCA, the Spokane Public Recs, any swim lessons, any of the sports of soccer and baseball, every single one of them will have a child or a participant who is autism, inevitably. Anybody who is in the service industry, you're going to have individuals with autism coming in and getting a hamburger. You're going to be doing that for them going out and shopping or going to the grocery store. There is absolutely no aspect about our community that won't be touched by this in one way or another. If you're talking the workforce, you are going to have people that are applying for your positions who have autism, and that they have some wonderful, unique talents. Just because they can't look you in the eye, a little socially awkward during your interview, you're missing out on a possible really fabulous employee that can do some skill sets. So I can't think of any area of life where nobody would be touched or impacted with autism. And what we want is for everybody to know and to understand so that we can all understand and accommodate. So a family can go get a hamburger, go to the, local pool. They can go get a job. They can go to the grocery store. They can handle it at the school or when they're going to the dentist or they're going to the doctor or they're going to the hairdresser. People can give them some more understanding and be able to have them have access and increase their life. The goal for anyone for autism or any disability is you should have the right to do everything everybody else does. And that's all about what we always say, increasing quality of life. They need access to community. There's nothing more important than that.
And with our understanding of, what would be your hopes with all the education and some of this campaign, some of the stuff that's coming out about this campaign? How would you want the community to operate?
I would like the community to understand and maybe operate or adjust what they do, particularly with autism spectrum disorders, in multiple ways. I think the first off, just having an understanding. Just a core understanding as why the environment might be too noisy or and an individual is having a tough time during that. I want the community to be able to adjust their behaviors in some ways so that individuals have easier access to things. Understanding maybe they have a communication system and they're pointing to something and, that's what they're doing, or they're handing you a picture. I would like, in regards to communication and pictures, I would like some of our providers and other people in our community to have access and understanding some of those things. For instance, you can get a picture board when you go into McDonald's. What a great thing. I can't communicate this way, but I can ask, we can get the picture board and I'll tell you I want a hamburger, I want the French fries, and I want a root beer. Those are the things that I want. I think that patience and understanding is the first step. And then also understanding that they might communicate different, that the environment might need to be adjusted a little bit more. Many places are now doing, such as airports, have environments in which they have lower stimulus or lower sensory things. And so individuals, can go in and just take a break. And the lights are lower, there's not as much sound, there's not as much movement and noise that can actually impact them. What do I want the community to do and to know?
We can come back to that.
Yeah,
You might come up with something.
I will.
But
It's
let's
a
talk
hard
about
one.
a little bit about your work with law enforcement and first responders.
So, several years ago, Dawn and I were several years ago, Dawn and I were asked to participate on a mental health committee that was started with the Spokane Police Department. And they invited several different partners in the community, mainly around mental health. But we were so excited that they understood that individuals with disabilities have unique needs as well. And it was a great community partnership for many people to come together once a month to brainstorm how can we support individuals with disabilities and mental health better, and how can we decrease some challenges when they interface with law enforcement or first responders. Through those meetings and conversations, the Spokane Police Department, along with Frontier Behavioral Health, have done an amazing job of increasing their crisis intervention training. Previously, only a few select of the police officers had gotten this enhanced training to be able to de-escalate and understand mental health and other partners. It's wonderful over the last several years Now, every law enforcement officer, first responders, dispatchers, they come from other counties as well, participate in a 40-hour crisis intervention training where they get, again, mental health and de-escalation and how do they interface, but they also get autism spectrum disorders and intellectual disabilities. And I've been privileged enough to participate and develop those trainings along with some other colleagues in the community. For instance, Holly Lyle from the Isaac Foundation is wonderful with working with the law enforcement and first responders and has developed a curriculum, Autism in the Wild, which is actually credentialed on a national level. But on a quarterly or twice a year, I'm able to go and speak to the law enforcement and say, what is autism? What is intellectual disabilities? What do you need to know? And how to respond to some of those unique challenges so we can decrease those crises.
What has been some of the feedback from some of the officers that has, any feedback from somebody who says, man, your training was good because
Right. One of the things that the crisis intervention training, and specifically with the autism and intellectual disabilities portion of that, there's nothing better when you hear from a police officer, wow, I came across somebody, and then I realized that they had autism, and I stepped back. I turned off the lights, and some strategies that we were able to give them actually de-escalated and actually made a difference in the interaction between the law enforcement and that individual, which there's nothing greater than that. Some of the feedback, another thing with doing the crisis intervention training is over the years, how many more individuals come up and say, my child has autism, my grandchild has autism, I think, this speaks to, my, nephew, and he may have autism. To see those connections that are actually happening are pretty amazing. And now it's not a mysterious thing about what is autism anymore. People are getting a general idea by doing continuous training of all the officers and law enforcement. It's not so mysterious anymore, and they're able to identify it better. And hopefully we can decrease more and more cases where it doesn't end up good and somebody gets hurt or has to go to the ER in the hospital or psychiatric unit. If we can do that, decrease those, it makes a big difference in people's lives and safety, not only for the individual, but for the officers and community as well. And
I know that Jill goes up to the hospital,
Mhm.
and there's a program up at the hospital that's going to be taking place. Dun and I are trying to get some funding for that.
Right.
So that's good. So tell us a little bit about what they're doing, at least at a hospital level here in this community.
Right, and let me tell you something else about the law enforcement.
Yeah.
So not only does the Spokane Police Department provide crisis intervention training for all the officers, they have an enhanced CIT training. So these are individuals that volunteer to be able to get even more training on crisis intervention training. And they have different sites that they go to and visit, and they have to do so many hours. Northwest Autism Center is one of those sites. And so they can select to come if they want to hear more about autism or see what we do and get more information about how to interact with individuals. Northwest Autism Center is another one of those sites that they can come for 4 hours and speak to me, watch treatment, talk to families, go into the in-home, and actually interface with individuals with autism. So the program.
Yeah, so the program is it Sacred Heart?
Mm-hmm. So our Community Connections Director, Jill Ide, is being able now, which is wonderful, to go up to Sacred Heart Hospital and work with their developmental pediatricians on site and help families navigate if they have a diagnosis. So if they see the developmental pediatrician and have a diagnosis, they can immediately go and see Jill, and she can help them navigate about what this is, what information, where to go next steps, how to navigate insurance, who are all the applied behavior analysis providers, and really connect with them right away, which is a wonderful resource for those families. Because you can imagine getting a diagnosis and then going home and then trying to, where did that number they gave me and I have to call. It's a nice transition for those families, immediate. We're fortunate to be able to do that due to one of the federal grants that the Department of Health was awarded, the Autism Spectrum Disorder and Developmental Disabilities. Short is AS3D. And so with that funding, we're able to send our Community Connections Director right there on site and be able to help navigate immediately after a diagnosis. And that is really crucial and being able to do that on our side of the state. Some other partners on the west side, the Washington Autism Advocacy and Alliance, also have on-site family navigators. It's a little bit easier for them on that side because they have multidisciplinary treatment, such as Seattle Children's Autism Center. And so when the individuals go there, it's autism and they're getting that, so it's a nice pipeline. We don't have that on this side of the state. It's another area that we're lacking here. And so any way we can help support the providers and developmental pediatricians to do those wraparound services and provide information navigation is really important and crucial.
I wonder sometimes about the homelessness in Spokane.
Oh, yes.
And the tie to that
Mm-hmm.
and individuals. And I've met several of them and I think they're on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about, what we're seeing in our community and another reason why maybe we should care.
Another reason why you need to care about autism spectrum disorder is because of other challenges we have in our community. They're part of that population. For instance, for individuals who are homeless, I guarantee there's some individuals who have autism spectrum disorder. They're unable to get a job. They might have other mental health issues. We know that individuals with autism might self-medicate. So if you're looking at substance abuse, unemployment, if you're looking at homelessness, then you're also looking about another population that is a part of that. And we have to understand maybe what their unique needs are so that we can actually help and assist them. They might have a very difficult time going to a homeless shelter because, maybe the environment is too stressful for them. Maybe their communication, that they're not able to truly articulate what their needs are. And it might be the reason why they can't get a job or unemployment is because of the autism, not because of skill sets or other things. So again, I don't care what population you're talking about. There's going to be individuals with autism, and we need to understand what their unique needs are so we can truly provide them the supports to be able to assist them for whatever they need. Get what you wanted?
You talked about, when they can come in. You have told us that, bullying, are they usually a bully sometimes too? Or are
They
usually-
can, but it's a different thing.
Okay, so let's talk about bullying and autism.
So everybody needs to understand in the school districts that bullying is an issue, particularly for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. They sometimes might be perceived as the actual bully. Sometimes because they have such a hard time with the social and communication and identifying, maybe they're not realizing what they're saying is hurting somebody's feelings, or they don't know that pushing on somebody is not what to do because they see other kids do it, so they're going to follow them. And so they might be perceived as being one of the bullies, and how we handle that is very different than you would traditionally with some other bullying incidences. So we want to get an understanding is, do they understand what they're doing is bullying? What other strategies can we help them, or how to identify? But we have to understand that children with autism spectrum disorders, or young adults, can be a target of bullying. And they might not understand that they're being bullied. So, for instance, our speech and language pathologist talked about one of her clients came in. She met him for the first time, and he comes in. He says, "Oh, you smell like onions," kind of nice stuff. And she's like, "That's an odd thing to say." And so she probed a little bit more, and he goes, "Well, that's what all the other kids say to me at school, and I'm the cool kid." So you can understand when they're making fun of them or they might be bullying him, he didn't recognize that he was being bullied and didn't understand. And he's like, "I am the cool one. I do this." And so now he's taken that to other people and thinking that's what you say when you think somebody's cool. You smell like onions. And so we have to be very aware of that. The organization Autism Speaks also has several toolkits that are very useful for resources. And one of them is talking about bullying in the schools and be able to handle those issues, because we do know that children with autism spectrum disorder has a higher rate of being bullied in schools. And we need to be on the lookout for that and to see what that is. Particularly if children don't recognize they're being bullied, then they're not going to come and tell you, "I'm being bullied." So we need to make sure that we're keeping our eyes out and open for that at all times.
You also said that people with autism have a higher incident rate of suicide.
Right.
Of a
Let me
lot of
see.
those things. Yeah,
Let me
let's
see.
look at that. I'm going to talk back to autism.
So autism spectrum disorder has a higher rate of mental health issues. They look about 40% of individuals with autism also has comorbidity, meaning that they also have mental health issues also along with their autism. Some individuals have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. All of those things can also be impacted for an individual with autism at a greater rate. A very scary statistic is that individuals with autism, and it kind of varies depending on the research or where you're looking, is 4 to 7 times greater rate of thoughts of suicide. So individuals, families, and schools and mental health providers need to know that and need to watch out for the chances of an individual with autism thinking or committing suicide. And so those are things that people don't necessarily understand. And maybe they see behaviors that are going on and they're like, "Oh, that's just the autism. That's just part of the autism." We need to look closer. We need to see if there's other mental health issues going on so we can appropriately treat them and appropriately get them what they need and hopefully prevent a crisis or a suicide that could have been prevented if individuals knew what to look out for and the unique things and the higher rate that occurs with autism.
Let's talk about ABA.
Mhm.
It has gotten a bad rap.
Mhm.
What is ABA just in general terms, in layman's terms? But let's talk a little bit about ABA is stuff like even an ABA technique was, we were talking about eating the food.
Mhm.
And, somebody who has an aversion to food and will only eat one thing. So let's talk about what ABA is, why it's gotten a bad rap, what is successful about it, and an example like the food thing is ABA.
So applied behavior analysis, otherwise known or commonly known as ABA, is the scientifically validated treatment for individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities. Applied behavior analysis has been around over 60 years. This is nothing new. What we do with applied behavior analysis is we analyze the environment, the behaviors, the skills of each individual behavior that an individual engages in, or what we want them to engage in. It is observable, it is measurable. And then we apply it to the real world. And applied behavior analysis must address socially significant skills and goals. That's a big misconception of ABA. They think we're just doing certain discrete skills, doing one. No, let me start that part over. Applied behavior analysis has gotten a bad rap. You might hear there's a lot of things on Google and videos about that. early on in our science, when we were applying it, particularly for individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities, there were researchers. Dr. Lobas is one of the classic that you'll see for videos on, that it seems very mean. We're making kids to be robots. They're sitting there doing, tasks and making them sit or holding them down. That's not where we are in the science. That it was just one portion in research and looking at that back years and years ago. And so people look at that and say, wow, ABA, those people are very mean. They're going to punish my kids. Actually, in reality, what we use is positive and negative reinforcement. And so we reinforce individuals for the behaviors that they do. It's very intentional. It's very broad of skill sets that we can actually do, whether it's communication, whether it's reducing challenging behaviors, whether it's increasing all of their skills of daily living skills, such as brushing your teeth, making a sandwich, getting dressed, from academics, for learning different academic skills, from reading and math, from vocational skills to doing employment. It's a wide range of skills and abilities that ABA can actually apply treatment for. ABA is based on the science of human behavior. And you notice that I said science of human behavior, not the science of autism behavior, not the science of disabilities and behavior. We know it works very well with them because we use reinforcement. We're very strategic. We have interventions that are proven to gain skills. But you will see applied behavior analysis in everywhere you go and everything you do. Applied behavior analysis is applied in manufacturing jobs to make sure how we do work productivity for different employees. So it's worked in businesses. It's worked, one of my favorite examples of applied behavior analysis is how we set up environments. We really look at environments and how does the environment get behaviors to occur. And what can we do in the environment to help with that or teach them how to navigate different environments. One of my favorite examples is casinos. I was in Las Vegas for the first time a couple of years ago, and it was amazing to say, I'm like, ooh, that's ABA, that's positive reinforcement, there's this, to see that. So you can see if you ever go into a casino that there are no windows. They set that up very intentionally based on the science of human behavior. You don't know if it's light or dark, what time it is. You will see there are no clocks. Very intentional. The way that the slot machines go. You're going to pull, you're going to pull, you're going to get, win just one time. That's intermittent reinforcement. We know that's going to get you to keep going. Oh, that's going to get me to keep going. All the different areas look the same, right? You can't find where the outside door is. It's amazing to try to navigate. It's like, okay, I'm here, but all I see is these tables and those, and you can go in circles to try to find the door. All of that is just applied behavior analysis. I have to say, I use a lot of that on my family and my husband. And so it all works for everybody. And so I think that people have to understand that it's accessible and it works. And it's just all about how humans behave. And why it works so well with individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities is because most people just learn by others and watching other people. And, like in kindergarten, when you go to kindergarten, you don't, nobody comes up and says, okay, when we line up, you need to do X, Y, Z. They just watch the other kids and they learn, and over time, they learn what appropriate behaviors are. But our kids might not learn by just observing and seeing what other things happen. We have to be very explicit and very hyper cognizant of what those skills are. Most time, you don't have to teach somebody, when you're washing your hands, okay, first thing you're going to do, turn on the water. Second thing you're going to do is get the soap. Oh, but is it a pump soap? Is it bar soap? Is it something that you push? All of those things, we have to be very intentional and maybe teach our children to understand so they can independently wash their hands when they get dirty.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Adam's going to get mad, but I throw my kids under the bus at all times.
Good.
So my youngest child does not have autism, but when he was born had some challenges. And as soon as he was born, he screamed. He was premature, and he screamed so loud that he lost his voice. And you can see a little tiny baby. And I knew pretty rapidly that he had very major challenges with sensory. And some individuals have sensory processing or sensory issues as well. But people don't understand that when people have sensory issues, how greatly it impacts everything in their life. So my son really had challenges with touch, okay? So he didn't want to be on the floor. He didn't want to be touched. And that is a huge challenge when you're looking at a baby. The number one thing they say is tummy time, right? So how do you put them on tummy time so they can get their strength, and that way they go through their developmental milestones. Because of his sensory issues, he started slowly not hitting each of those developmental milestones. And you can imagine, finally he got referred, we were able to get him for an evaluation. At first he looked like he had cerebral palsy, because he had very odd movements. So with his bottle, it was cold and kind of wet or warm. He didn't like the touch of the bottle, so he didn't want it on his hands. So he would kind of put it with his hands here and try to do. And when he would try to crawl, he would only crawl one way because he didn't want to touch the floor this way. So you can understand how just sensory for that would be very challenging. He had such challenges with the sensory where the bottom of his feet and different textures, so he didn't want to touch the floor. He didn't want to walk in grass. It was so significant that he had shoes, and that I had to use applied behavior analysis in the home to help him desensitize to tolerate walking in his shoes on different surfaces. Whether it was a concrete, then we would move to the grass. Like he would freeze on the grass and want some, but he didn't want to walk on it. To the gravel, to the bark at the park. All of those things we had to slowly work on so that he could tolerate actually going and walking over those things. Samson also had what we call vestibular challenges. So that's where your inner ears and movement, and some children, they can go on the spinny things forever and ever and never get dizzy. That's because they're seeking that out. They're hyposensitive to that. Samson was hypersensitive and wanted to avoid movement. So when he was little, it became very clear that he didn't want to be bounced. Normally, you put kids in swings and go through. Sam could not tolerate the swing, and he would scream and scream. We could not put him in a stroller because when you move in the stroller, he didn't know where he was, and all that was just too overwhelming for him. Most individuals, when you have a little baby, one of the first things you do is because babies love to be movement and they love to swing. So put them in the car and let's drive around until they fall asleep because it's calming for them, right? And if you stop at a stoplight, like, no, it's going to wake up the baby. But for my child, it was different because whenever the car was moving, he couldn't tolerate it. And he'd scream and he'd scream and he'd scream. All the way for movements. And then I would get to a stoplight or a stop sign and take a deep breath. Phew. But I will tell you, you move a lot more in a car than you're stopped. And you can imagine over time, it's like, I can't take him anywhere because it really, and his older brothers had a challenge with that. I had to have them do other things so they could tolerate a very loud screaming baby. But over time, with early intervention, and he went to the Spokane Guild School, a fabulous organization that we love to partner with and we do trainings with and collaborate with. So he got early intervention because I knew and got him an evaluation. But also the techniques of applied behavior analysis with what I knew at home changed the trajectory of his life for him to be able to tolerate all these different areas of walking on things or touching things or movement. So that when he got older, he has strategies and he also is able to tolerate things and be able to function in his regular classroom. He still has strategies where he might need headphones. He won't watch movies because movies, actual, production movies, go at a faster rate. And he can't tolerate it. And I always say, we're working on movies. We got to get him to be able to watch movies. And some parents are like, what's the big deal that he doesn't watch movies? Gosh, I wish my kid didn't obsess about movies. But unfortunately, my kid doesn't have childhood water cooler talk. He doesn't know about the newest movie that people are talking about. He doesn't know about Frost. He doesn't know. See, I don't even know half the childhood movies because we don't do them anymore. And so it's interesting to see that some of those things really, truly impact the life that you might not even realize. So it impacts him socially in conversations with other kids because he doesn't know about it. Or they watch a special day movie at the classroom and he puts his headphones on and he tries and tries, but then eventually goes up to the teacher, I'm overwhelmed, and he needs to leave. That impacts a lot of ways. Again, I want the general community to understand that. It's not weird, it's not this, it's not the kids avoiding, it's really that his nervous system, the way it goes, is overwhelmed. And we need to adjust for that. And we need to say it's okay, and it's not weird that somebody's wearing headphones. It's not weird, that, kids are avoiding things. And how can we look at classrooms in a way that accommodate for all kids? Noise levels, visuals, don't need everything on the walls. It's too overwhelming. So let's look at the purpose of it and how we can make sure our kids are educated appropriately. All right. All right, there you go,
Okay.
Samson.
We'll do that, and then we're gonna do, what's the last one I was gonna ask you? Okay, let's do that one first.
So another area that people might not realize that can be a challenge for individuals with autism spectrum disorder is eating and food intake. And this can be extremely, some people might not realize that autism spectrum disorder can also impact food intake and how people eat. Individuals don't have some physiological reason. It's not influx. It's not, their tongue or chewing, something physiological that's preventing them to eat different foods. It's more behavioral. And a lot of times it is looking at either perseverating on something or hypersensitive to taste and smells. And so it's not unusual to have individuals that only want one thing, and that is it. One of the things that I like to do with my kids is watch cooking shows. And there was a cooking show a couple years back where there were just home cooks, and they did a tier of going against very famous chefs. So if you beat one, you got 1,000. If you beat number 2, you got 5,000. You went up the way to go. Well, there was this mother that came on, and she beat every single professional chef, like knocked it out of the park, won all this money. And they were interviewing her. And they said, so how did you become such a good cook? She said, well, I have a 12-year-old son who has autism. And they kind of looked, and she explained. The only thing he would eat was something that was the color of white, like just white. I'm not talking off-white. We're not talking anything. And she had to get so creative of understanding about how she could get food intake for him that he would be willing to eat that was white. And I challenge everybody to go to a grocery store and just put everything that's pure white in your cart and see how nutritious that is and see how you would be able to cook. And I'm not talking, yogurt that has little specks of vanilla yogurt. That wouldn't cut it. They would notice that and say no to that. So it's interesting that people don't necessarily understand that. And many people and families might say, well, they'll eat when they're hungry. That's not it. It's a neurological disorder. It's part of that is preventing them to do that. So we need intervention for the health and the safety for these kids, for them to be able to thrive. It's not unusual for some of our clients only to be on a liquid diet because of issues that they have with feeding. And applied behavior analysis, the systematic approach, actually helps with that in the feeding. And the next thing you know, we're hoping to get them their food repertoire. And that mom also mentioned her kid had applied behavior analysis, and now he eats a whole bunch of things. And that is part of the success of that.
did you do that with, you were talking about?
Right. So one of the ways to do treatment, to what we could say is increase your food repertoire for food things. And many times they don't want it on their plate. They don't want it near. They don't want to look at that. So we do a very step-by-step process. And it might be that it's right there on the table. And we work on that and reinforce them, not punish them, reinforce them until they can tolerate that. Then we might say, okay, we're going to put it on the plate. And you're going to reinforce it until that. Once they can tolerate that, okay, we're going to touch it. Okay, once they can reinforce that and do that, now you're going to pick it up. Now you're going to pick it up, and you're going to just touch it to your lips. Woohoo! Now you're going to pick it up and put it on your tongue. Just pick it up, put it in your mouth. You're going to pick it up. Now you're going to take a bite and you can spit it out. That's fine. You tolerated the texture, the taste. Good. Now you're going to do a couple bites. Now we're going to do till you can chew and you can swallow. It is a very systematic way that we're doing to increase their tolerance, reinforcing them along the way, not forcing or doing that until they're able to do it independently. And then we do that with other foods until they're able to do that increased intake.
Okay, we're gonna finish up here. I have a child
Okay.
that has been either diagnosed or, I'm pretty sure has autism.
Right.
They're gonna do a thing. What can they expect? What do you love about your job? What do you love about the center? What kinds of things are you doing that's good, that you're really proud of?
I cannot say enough about how it is a privilege to work at Northwest Autism Center. I came from the education field. Very important to teach teachers, very important to work with schools. But coming to Northwest Autism Center allowed me to participate in such a bigger picture and have such a bigger influence on our community, on individuals, and just general life. When somebody comes into Northwest Autism Center, what I love about it is you will be greeted and welcomed with open arms to part of the community. You can share anything, and it's not anything we probably haven't heard. They can come in if their child's having a challenging time and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're like, it's okay. Not a problem. Let's get some toys. Let's see what we can do. When they come to Northwest Autism Center, I feel like it is a place where people can be safe, where they can be honest, and where they can get assistance. And it doesn't matter really what it is. Somebody's going to say hello, somebody's going to talk to you, somebody has the expertise so they can go see Jill Ide or Community Connections, just say, oh, you got to talk to Dana. Dana will be a good one for that. And then we actually work as a team, collectively, to meet as many needs as we can. And we look at the bigger picture. It's just not an isolation of treatment or this area. We really look at a comprehensive approach. And to me, there's no other place like it.
There is always a need for funding. So let's talk about that. What would you hope to fund? You've got some grants going now, but what are some of the things that you guys are working on that will help?
One of the challenges is always at a nonprofit organization, we don't just do direct treatment. We have a bigger influence on the community as a whole. And having funding to support our work in the community on a local, state, and national level is invaluable. When I go to Olympia, or Dawn does, or we go to talk to providers about trainings, we do so many, I can't tell you how many trainings I do pro bono because people don't have the funding to pay for us, but it's important. But to have funding to allow us the time, because I'm not 100% billable. People don't come and pay, right? When I'm doing, I need to go do the foster care families, it's important because there's a rise of children with autism in foster care families. It's important to do. but they don't have the funding to be able to pay for me. And so first part of the funding is to do the important work and allow us the time and the travel and the ability to educate and build that competency and capacity. So that's always an aspect that funding is always valuable. I always say at Northwest Autism Center, ideas are not the problem. We always have ideas. We always have dreams. We know there's gaps in the services or access in the community. But what's difficult is having funding sources to get them up and going and figuring out ways to be able to sustain over time. Some of the wonderful things we would love to do is also serving adult populations and providing applied behavior analysis for them. Currently, insurance does not cover that. I don't know, miraculously at age 21, you don't get treatment anymore. But they need treatment. You know, again, it's about employment and housing and independent living. There's so much we could do for the adult population and continue to provide skills and strategies for them and so they can be in the community. So some of the work we'd like to do is targeted for that. We would like to work to get a multidisciplinary diagnostic clinic here on this side of the state. They're only on the west side, and then you have to drive to Seattle, which is virtually impossible for somebody who has a child with autism. So we want to help pilot and build with collaborations with all of our, medical providers and people to make that happen. We would like to do, more training in the medical providers and develop strategies and protocols and give them visual supports to be able to have in the emergency room, to be able to have in the dentist office. I would love to go with, all right, let me know what the steps and procedures are that they're doing, during a typical dental exam. Or what are pictures that can help them communicate? Oh, I hurt, I do this. I would love to come with a little bin that would come and say, here, these are things you can put up and how you can use for individuals, whether you have autism or other issues as well, to be able to be more inclusive. I'd love to be able to do that for the haircutting people. There's many things and gaps that would be beneficial for it. Let me think of some of the other projects. I mean, there's a ton.
A ton.
There's a ton.
Well, you kind of covered it with employment.
Be able to not only help the individual gain skills with employment, but really reach out to our local community employers and letting them understand that and helping them understand training and about what is autism and maybe what they can do in their environments or when they're looking at customers or employment. I would love to have a place of business, such as a coffee shop or some other business, where we would be able to help train individuals with autism and other disabilities. And they can come on in, and that's the people. You have job coaches, and you're able to go through and teach them those skills. We're serving the community. It's people can come in and see and have, interactions with individuals. It would be great to own a house or a couple of houses so that we can use that as training grounds for and do an intensive program, kind of like we do with the early childhood program. But let's do it from 18, 21, and 24 people. Let's come in and let's do our laundry. Let's do our cooking. Now we're going to go to work and we're going to go to our place of business and utilize that for them to gain skills and then help them generalize to other areas. That would be a wonderful dream to be able to do that and partner or own it ourselves and be able to provide those experiences.
You said this whole to trust people at Northwest Autism Center. What would you tell these people?
One of the things I think is so critical is that people are able to trust Northwest Autism Center and what we do. And trust is so important, particularly when you're talking about your child or your young adult or you have autism. And are people going to understand? I think it's important that people understand and trust that we have the expertise and the staff and the knowledge and ability to provide effective, high-quality treatment. I think it's important that they understand that they can feel safe at Northwest Autism Center. There won't be any judgment. I feel that they need to understand how we strive for the bigger picture, and we strive to help them in any way that we can. And that's really important, is that people can trust Northwest Autism Center, and we will help you in any way we can. And if we can't, we'll do our best to try to find somebody who can. It's another reason why Northwest Autism Center is very unique. We're the only applied behavior analysis treatment program here that is a nonprofit. And that does make a difference. So when somebody calls us and they want applied behavior analysis treatment, we keep a list of all the different for-profit ABA providers. And we help them, say, here's the list, call them, get on their wait list. If we can't serve you, go there. Our main focus is that people get high-quality services and treatment. It's not from us, that's okay. We're not going to be the big one to do it all. We want others. We will help others come to the community to be able to build things. And that's important. And that's another reason I feel people can trust us. Don't just come to us and then you get to be with us all the time. We're here to help in any way we can, whether it's with us or whether it's with other people and other providers.
Anything else you want to tell us?
One thing that I also have to say is it is such an honor to work at Northwest Autism Center because of all staff, whether they're administration, whether they're direct services, whether they're the receptionist, everybody cares. And everybody's there for a purpose and a reason and maybe a bigger picture than other places. But this would not exist and we would not be where we are in our community, even though we still have a long way to go and a lot of things to still do. We would not be where we are right now without Dawn Seidel. Her vision, her tenacity, her knowledge and skills and going through and not stopping over the last 15 years has been pretty incredible. And to be able to work by her side has been pretty phenomenal. And I have to say, a force to be reckoned with. So, she is. So, what else? That's it.
I think that's autism be diagnosed.
So autism spectrum disorder can be diagnosed as early as 18 months. I mean, reliably. So you can imagine if the national diagnosis is 4 years, we're missing a lot of kids. Screening should be happening with all physicians for autism in 18, 24, and 36 months. That has been the recommendation for 10 years. Unfortunately, many are not doing autism-specific screening and catching it fast enough. Dr. Wendy Stone at the University of Washington was awarded an NIMH grant, National Institute of Mental Health grant. And it was a 5-year grant, and it's in the 5th year now. Northwest Autism Center and myself assist in that grant as a community liaison for Spokane County. The grant is called Screen, Refer, and Treat, because we know it takes a long time to get a diagnosis. Even if you have a concern, you might be waiting months to be able to get in for a diagnosis. So Dr. Stone has worked and looked at programs where they actually targeted physicians to make sure that they screen, and then refer to early childhood intervention. So concentrating on children under the age of 3. And so they did amazing training with local physicians so that they would do automatic screenings. They would refer to early intervention birth to 3 programs. And then they trained the early intervention programs of how to do what we call a tier 2 screener, a more in-depth screening tool, as well as applied behavior analysis specific, very easy, called reciprocal imitation training technique that all the therapists can do so they can starting to get autism-specific intervention while they're ready to wait for the evaluation. A diagnosis does not drive intervention or services. It's the need. So they're really looking at how do we get that pipeline from screening them, you refer them, and those programs treat them prior even to getting a diagnosis or being on a wait list for applied behavior analysis. And so it's been a very important work that Dr. Stone has done, and we've been very honored to assist in any way we can. And Spokane has been very lucky to have their expertise and be able to have this training based on this grant.
One last thing, we know that what do they kind of think? We had talked about environmental factors, we were talking about genetics, what is
Right.
going on in the research?
Well, the research for autism spectrum disorder and the cause really is still two-pronged, is looking at the genetic component that we know there is a genetic component to autism, as well as some type of environmental stressor. Many different studies going on regarding what that is. You might see clusters in the United States where they're actually doing more targeted research. It has been everything from pollution to pesticides, but nothing that we've been able to look and identify it. One of the reasons why it's so difficult to do some of the research on the cause of autism is because it's such a wide spectrum. Such wide characteristics and how they manifest are so wide. So it can be very difficult to do some of that research. There has been a lot of research done in genetic markers, such as the SPARK project. So there's a lot of genetic kind of components that have been going through and doing that. There's a lot of neuroscience that's been looking about the cause or how it manifests with autism spectrum disorder, but there truly isn't anything. Later, when we get into more of the causes and stuff too, we'll do Dr. Georgina Lynch at WSU. She's really good. She has some research. I mean, there's a ton of research going on.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about
Yeah,
that. And
but-
if we can get anybody over here, any of the research.
Yeah, I can get them all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can get a couple.
Okay.
But I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, I know, we don't know, and it's like.
Is it diet?
Yeah.
So another issue with autism spectrum disorder is the vast interventions that are out there that are not necessarily scientific or evidence-based. And this is a very challenge for families to navigate. Oh, this worked for my child, you should try it. I mean, they will do anything if they're suspect and pay any money, for accessing, will this help? It helped this person, will it help mine? We have to be very careful in how we educate families about what is truly evidence-based. We kind of train families as kind of red light, yellow light, and green light. Like green light is, wow, that is evidence-based. We know it, it's scientific. Yellow light is, oh, it's emerging and, it's almost there. We just haven't had quite enough science behind it, but it won't harm the child. Red light, there are interventions out there that put the child's life at risk. And a lot of people charging a lot of money that can actually harm or kill a child. And families need to know what those are. If you Google autism spectrum interventions, I can't remember the numbers now, but it's like 1.5 pop up in 0.5 seconds. I mean, how do you navigate that? How do you go through? And that's another reason why having someplace to go and trust with Northwest Autism Center to let you know and how to navigate that is truly important. Because I can't imagine doing it on your own and weeding through that and not knowing if something might be harmful for your child or bankrupt you because you're spending so much money on interventions that might not help. And so it's important for families to understand that as well. So,
That was good.
ethical things.